Ever wanted some tips for running large groups? Then stay tuned for today's episode. Hello and welcome to RPG PhD. I'm Dr. Ben, and today we will discuss strategies for running tabletop role-playing games for large groups. Some GMs will tell you not to bother when you get too many players in your group and that your best option would be to run 2 games and split the players. But you can run a large group of players if you adjust your expectations and understand the challenges associated with running oversized groups. I ran a campaign for many years that had at any given time 10 plus players, and it can be fine, although obviously it's not ideal. Establish clear communication. I bring this up often, but it's so important that it bears repeating. Encourage open communication among players and set expectations for active participation and respectful listening. Expect a different type of game. There are trade-offs for large games. Each player will have less time in the spotlight, and there isn't always time to stop and have those little moments where everyone talks to a shopkeeper, and most role-playing conversations must be part of a larger group activity, or you can subdivide the groups, but more on that later. You also must guard against the center of attention players and make sure that they don't dominate every interaction. Make sure to give the quiet players opportunities to initiate and engage. These are all issues that you may wish to discuss with your players in a session 0. Use visual aids. Incorporate visual aids such as maps, handouts, or tokens to help players visualize the game world and keep track of important information. Theater of the mind can become more difficult when you have a large number of players. Having to mentally keep track of where everyone is in relation to everyone else and the monsters can be a challenge. Using miniatures or tokens can be really useful here, but even if you don't use miniatures, setting up terrain or having a map that players can reference to understand where they are in relation to other players is really useful. This allows for a hybrid theater of the mind and map and miniature style of play. Streamline gameplay. Simplify rules and mechanics to keep the game flowing smoothly and avoid lengthy delays. Large groups can be challenging to manage when it comes to complex rules and mechanics. Consider streamlining game mechanics, focusing on the core aspects of the system and minimizing unnecessary complexities. This helps keep the game flowing smoothly and reduces the burden on both the GM and the players. For example, instead of rolling for initiative, use a round the table option and just shift where it starts each time. Trying to track initiative for large groups eats up a lot of time better spent on other game aspects. Delegate responsibilities. You can also assign players specific tasks such as tracking initiative, managing resources, or taking notes to distribute the workload and keep the game running effectively. Consider recruiting an assistant game master, an AGM, to help manage the game. AGMs can handle specific tasks such as rules clarification, initiative tracking, or NPC interactions. This alleviates some of the GM's workload and ensures a smoother gaming experience. If a rule comes up, the AGM can look it up while the next player goes, and then once the rule is resolved, the original player takes their turn. The most important thing is to keep the game moving, as combats can really drag on in large groups. Implement time management. Set time limits for decision making and discussions to ensure that everyone has a chance to participate and to prevent the game from slowing down. Large groups may require more time for decision making and resolution. Set time limits for discussions and encourage players to make timely decisions. Use techniques such as round robin or popcorn style narration to ensure everyone has a chance to contribute without excessive delays. Encourage players to figure out what they are going to do before their turn comes up. If you trust your players, have them pre-roll their to hit and damage rolls, so when you get to them in the turn order, they can relay what they rolled to hit or that they hit and what their damage is. Then have the player or GM narrate the outcome and then move on to the next player. This can make combat lightning fast. What you don't want is to come to a player's turn and they are waiting to decide what to do. When you have 10 plus people and each person takes 30 seconds to a minute to decide, that really adds up and combat can really slow down. Utilize subgroups. Divide the large group into smaller subgroups for specific encounters or tasks to maintain focus and create opportunities for more dynamic interactions. You can also group players together into initiative groups where they all act together like a unit. They pre-roll, decide as a group on their actions, and then the group leader reports out when it's their turn. While they're reporting and recording, you are already moving on to the next combat along with the next grouping of enemies or NPCs. During roleplay encounters, you can also divide the group into 2 or 3 smaller groups, send them on missions or tasks, and cut back and forth between them. Keep everyone engaged. One of the biggest challenges is keeping the players actively engaged in playing the game rather than playing on their phone or chatting with another inactive player. One way to do this is to design encounters with terrain features or other random elements that make the characters react to ongoing environmental situations between turns. For example, let's say the group is fighting a red dragon in its volcanic lair. After a player takes their turn, the GM might call for a test or save to avoid lava bursts or volcanic rock slides. If the players fail, they are knocked down or set on fire, or maybe have disadvantage on their next attack, etc. This helps everyone to stay engaged when it's not their turn. As a GM, you also need to really bring the interesting narrative descriptions and combat to life to help keep the players involved in the story. If it becomes just numbers, not only will the combat be boring, but you will lose players when it's not their turn. Other considerations. Try to discourage hirelings, companions, NPCs, and jettison GM NPCs, anything basically that adds another combatant and could potentially slow down the game. Even if you implement all the above, just know that combat encounters are going to take longer than normal, and depending on your session time, usually one large or maybe one small and one large encounter is all you need to prepare. Understand that most encounters will need to have their power increased, and adding tons of enemy combatants that require tracking are a nightmare. If you want lots of creatures in the combat, think about swarms of creatures that have a single stat block, or use minions, which are a one-hit dead sort of enemy. When using larger creatures, maybe think about adding more actions that happen in between the player's actions, or creatures that can attack everyone each round, or who have auras that deal ticking damage each round. I also think that until you can see what a party can do damage-wise, you might want to keep monster hit points fluid and adjust them on the fly to make the encounter fun instead of doubling or tripling hit points. Keep powerful items in check by handing them out less, or by handing out items that are useful but not super powerful. This is because in a party with 10 plus, that power tends to grow exponentially. By implementing these tips, you can effectively manage and run tabletop role-playing games for large groups, creating an enjoyable and immersive experience for all players involved. I hope you enjoyed this video on running large groups. Please share your thoughts for how you like to run large groups in the comments section below. If you found this content valuable, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. It's much appreciated. Thanks for watching. See you next time.